fingertips above the water. You watched me drown. You could have saved me, but you let me down, yeah.
Dave, welcome back.
Okay, thank you, Eric. How are you?
I'm doing great, and I assume you're doing great too from everything you carried in here, and all of the posts of social media, all the photography of your trip, and
Well, let's see. When I was here last, it was show 32, right?
Yes, sir.
And that was when? Like, it seems like maybe over the summer.
It was July, maybe?
July?
Is that about right?
Okay.
Something like that?
Yeah, but you've been busy. You've done like 70 shows
Tonight's
total. Congratulations.
75. Thank you very much.
That's good. It's great to see that. So
I appreciate you coming back.
No, my pleasure. Thanks for the invitation.
Because I will tell you, the last show you were on here, the viewer count is extremely high.
Oh, good.
So it went over very well.
Glad to hear that. It was fun, yeah.
Yeah, it was a good deal. And I got introduced to some good red wine.
Yeah, it was fun.
It was affordable.
Yeah, absolutely. That's my strong suit. And, since we last talked in terms of the trips, in September and October, I went with Sam Patti from La Prima Espresso. We organized a trip to northern Italy.
Okay.
Started out in Milan. I visited a friend of mine who lives there. He's a French guy who married an Italian woman, and he works for Bosch, and he's located in Milan.
Okay.
So it was nice to see him. He has two young kids, and he actually graduated from Duquesne Business School, so he has this real soft spot for Pittsburgh.
Okay, I bet.
So I brought these like a Duquesne ski cap and a shirt for the kid, They're putting them on. They're running around in Milan with these things. And he said his daughter won't take off the ski cap.
That's very cool.
That was fun.
That's very cool.
And from there, we met the group, which was 17 people, including myself and my wife.
Okay.
My brother and his wife, my sister and her husband, and then Sam and his brother-in-law and some other folks from Pittsburgh. And we headed out to Lake Garda, which is a big glacier lake, which was nice. And then we went up to Trentino, and then up to Rovereto, which was a place where they had a lot of battles during World War I. Then up to Bolzano, which is near Austria. And at the end, I was able to spend some time with my brother and sister and their spouses at Lake Como. And so along this trip, we went to wineries, we went to restaurants, we went to cultural places. One of the highlights culturally was going to this, they call it the Peace Bell.
Okay.
And it's a bell in Rovereto that after World War I, all the countries that were in World War I donated cannons, which were melted down to make this bell. Huge bell. I don't know how big it is, Eric, but I mean, it's like, it must be 30 feet, 40 feet high, and it rings up in the mountains, and it's just so moving to hear this bell ring every night, and it's in to remind people about war. Now, unfortunately, World War II intervened, and when the Nazis came in, they didn't ring the bell.
But the bell survived.
The bell
World
survived.
War II.
But it took a guy after World War II because it wasn't maintained. I guess you got to maintain these bells, and he actually refurbished it, and in the 60s, he rededicated it, and they still ring it every night. So, in Rovereto, you'll be sitting there, and if you can imagine, it's in this valley with mountains on each side, and it's on one side of the valley.
Right.
And you're down in the town, and they do it at dusk every night. And so you hear this bell tolling, and it's just amazing, man.
If it's really that big, it has to be.
Yeah, bong.
Yeah, it's got to be
bong, So that was very cool. And then when we went up to Bolzano, which is near Austria, and it's very Germanic as well as Italian, but we went up to this farm up in the mountains, which was a free-range pig farm where they make hams and such, but if you're familiar with you hear a lot about here in this country, how they basically cram pigs into these tight pens, the waste goes into the river. This is all natural. They have them up in the mountains. They're running free in pastures, free range, and they're gambling around. I mean, they're still going to be slaughtered. But the thing about it is, he, has this idea that while they're alive, they should have some quality of life.
Yeah,
and
more humane.
It's amazing. The quality of the meat is really amazing. So that was a highlight.
It's probably grass fed. I'm guessing probably as opposed to
corn as well as grass.
Okay.
But they eat a lot of grass, and they're not as big and fat, and they're not just raising them
to slaughter them.
It's the quality of the meat, that they're doing.
Right.
So that was fun, and then I really like Lake Como. I didn't know what to expect. I'd never been there. You hear a lot about like George Clooney has a house there, and they have Bellagio, which is a big shopping place, the same place as named in Vegas, and you can ride boats around this lake, which is a glacier lake again with very steep sides.
Okay.
But we stayed in a little town which was on one of the stops for the ferry, but up on a hillside with a nice terrace, and it was very quiet. And we made dinner every night and sat on the terrace and looked out there and just enjoyed each other's company, had some good wine. Drove up to Switzerland one day to Lugano, and that was thrilling. So that was a lot of fun. I hope to go back to Lake Como someday. And I was prepared to think it was going to be too much of a hustle everywhere, and you can find that there, but there's also nice quiet places as well. Okay. So that's what I like,
Well, some of your photography.
You saw some of that, yeah?
Oh, absolutely right. Yeah, and now is photography a hobby for you, or are you just using your phone?
Just using my phone.
Amazing. Yeah,
whenever I see something,
fabulous.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting to share that, and I always try to take pictures of the places where I am, or interesting topics, or wineries, or what have you. Another place we went to is Ferrari Winery, just like the car, but different. It has nothing to do with different family, right? Same spelling, And that was up in the hills, and that was a pretty good place because first of all they make very good sparkling wine, 5 million bottles a year, if you can imagine that. They have like 2,000 growers who give them grapes, and all by method champenoise, the same method as they use in Champagne to make great sparkling wines. But the history of the place is amazing because that's where the Cardinals, they have a house up on the hill. They stayed there in the summer when they were doing the Council of Trent, which was big in the Catholic Church. And they have a nice restaurant, a 2-star Michelin restaurant, where we went for lunch, and the guys on the tour, the people on the tour, they liked that one.
I am sure.
So that was a lot of fun. I had forgotten it was even that Michelin starred place. But Ferrari is a good sparkling wine place. You can get those wines in the PA system, and around the nation. But Ferrari, just like the car. But if you like good sparkling wine, Ferrari's a good one. That's also up north, obviously. Up north, yeah. That was at Lake near Trento, which is just above Lake Garda.
Okay.
And so that was that one. And then in November, I went to France, to Burgundy, and to Paris. But I've had this ongoing project. I'm writing a book about Burgundy, and it's taken, basically Burgundy is my favorite place. I like many, many wine areas, but to me, just as a matter of taste, that's what I like. They use Pinot Noir and Chardonnay as their main grape varieties. But they also have Gamay down in the southern part, and also Eligote, which is a white wine grape, and the Gamay is a red wine grape. But what I like about it is you can still find a lot of characters. I mean, when I write about something, I want the personality of the guy making it or the woman making it, the story of their family, to visit where they are, growing the vines, and the idea of passion for it, as well as smart business, making good wine. And a lot of these places, some of these families, they go back 6, 7, 8 generations, more than that. It's truly amazing to go into these little places. And I've been going there since the 90s, and I've seen a lot of changes. It kind of has this reputation of being too expensive and too complicated. But see, to me, I don't think it's so much complicated as it is diverse. there are 4,000 growers there, many different vineyards.
Sure.
But if you approach it as trying to appreciate the diversity as opposed to getting kind of confused by the complexity of Burgundy, you can really have a lot of fun with it. And then there are what they call regional wines, Bourgogne regional wines, which are, if you think of it as a pyramid, you have the Grand Cru at the top, you have the Premier Cru, the Village, and then at the broad bottom are these regional wines, which you can still buy, at least for now. We're going to talk about Tarriffs in a little bit.
Yes, sir.
But for under $20 a bottle.
Wow.
And most people are looking for, if you're looking for something more than an industrially produced wine, they might spend between $10 and $20. And you can get good Burgundy wines for $20, $25.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. So that is my idea, to take people on a journey through Burgundy and to show them that you can find good values there, etc.
How long have you been working on that project?
This has been something I started visiting in the 90s, but it's a 14-chapter book.
Okay.
I have an introduction and a couple of chapters written. Okay. So, but, I have other work that I do. So I don't just have time to write all this chapter. So for me, the big challenge in 2020, we are 2020.
Yeah, right? Hard to believe, huh?
Is to be more disciplined about doing this, because when I do it, I probably have, I'd say maybe 40 to 50 interviews in French that I have to transcribe. And I started to do it, but that's what I need to do to make it something more than just, A, B, C, stop here, stop there.
Right.
The personality and to communicate that to these people. And, nobody has the last word on Burgundy. You got 4,500 producers. But I want to, give my take on what I like about it. And, one of the things that's happening there, as I mentioned, this Aligote, and I had the great opportunity to visit with Becky Wasserman Hone, who is a importer in Burgundy since I guess she's been there since the 60s, and she's very well respected. And she organized a tasting with this group called the Aligoters, which is a bunch of young guys, not so young guys too, who are trying to promote this Aligote grape. I don't know if you've ever even heard of it.
Aligote?
Aligote, yes.
Okay.
And they're doing a lot of creative stuff, because there's one of the keys to the whole thing is how you approach growing the fruit, and if you have old vines, and how dedicated you are. And this is a group of people who want to keep that heritage going, because the quality is there, and yet people don't know about it. So, for me, it was good to discover a lot of new Aligote producers who also do Chardonnay, Pinot Noir.
Okay.
And we had a lot of fun, and I discovered a lot of stuff. They have some gentleman from Houston, a rapper, did a little rap about Aligote. And if you go to my website, daveswinecellar.com, daveswinecellar.com, I wrote an article about Aligote, which it was the most popular thing I've ever written. I mean, thousands of people hit on this thing.
Interesting.
And that was encouraging to see.
Sure.
Because, if that's a chapter, because I'm definitely going to write about Aligote, that would be part of it. And, there's many other things. And the key is getting to that. But it's kind of demystifying and making it fun.
What's the uniqueness about that particular grape? Yeah.
It's
or the attraction to it.
Well, it has a reputation for producing a lot of fruit, and you can make a lot of wine from it. And traditionally, some of the producers used it to make a cash cow, a cheap wine that the working people in France would take and put a little maybe blackberry liqueur in it, throw it back, and it was cheap, and it was sold at supermarkets primarily.
Okay.
But if you treat it like Chardonnay, it can make really top-end wines, and for not much more expensive, but something that when you discover it, you say like, geez, this is a really good table wine, as opposed to some of the Chardonnay-based Grand Cru wines that might be, $100, $200, $300 a bottle.
Correct.
You can buy an outstanding Aligote for maybe $20 or $25. So it feeds into that idea I have of, all of us want to get a deal. If you go to the right producers, you can get a really good, well-made Aligote wine. So
okay,
that's part of the deal there.
Okay. But how was the food over there?
But the rap guy said, I got to tell you what the rap guy said. He said, Aligote is my go-to when I can't afford a Grand Cru. I thought that was pretty good. And it goes on and on and on.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, it is good. So check that out at daveswinecellar.com. But yeah, the food's the other thing that
I can't even imagine.
They have a tradition of doing quality, but not having large portions, which is kind of different from some of what we do.
Yes,
but,
correct.
Correct. Good quality. And, getting local products, and they have the possibility of doing that because they have very good producers of cheeses, poultry, beef, all that kind of stuff, So, that's a big part of it, both in Italy as well, and we some of my guests actually tell me on the tour, they say, oh, man, we went to too many restaurants, What can I tell you? I mean, then some, if you don't go to enough of them, they complain about it. But
is there such a thing?
Another thing I did in France, which was, for me personally, very moving in a way, but something I wanted to do. My grandfather fought in World War I. He grew up in Arnold, Pennsylvania. Okay. And his mother was from France. His father was from Belgium. So he went over with the Expeditionary Force in 1918, and after the armistice was signed, they had all these troops. They signed the armistice on the 11th day, the 11th month, at the 11th hour.
Right.
But then what do? They can't ship them back. It wasn't like they were flying in those days. They had to get on a boat.
Right.
So my grandfather, who spoke French, he had the assignment to go and find a place for this division to stay until they could get their turn in the line to go home.
Okay.
And he actually kept, he wrote letters back, and my brother found them in kind of an archive, and I read them, and I saw the town where he stayed, and it happened to be in Burgundy. So I got the opportunity to go to the town where he stayed. The place where he lived, the building is still there.
Wow.
The family that owned it is no longer there. But that was just very cool to go back and see. My grandfather was a 25-year-old guy.
Yeah.
I walked in the steps where he was, and I put some pictures online of it, and it was quite amazing. And one of the letters he wrote back, he actually had his cousins come down from Paris, and they had a wine and food dinner.
Okay.
And he went to this town of Tonnerre, which is nearby, and that's one of the places I visited, and I want to write about contemporary producers. So there's another chapter in my book.
You just added one.
You know what I'm saying? Because to me, that's a pretty cool thing.
Absolutely.
They're still making good wine in Tonnerre. They were doing it back in 1918 when my grandfather was there. And so that'll be a challenge to communicate that.
History's fascinating to me. It really was. How did the Germans destroy a lot of the vineyards in France when they came in, or did they seize them for what they thought was going to be the possession of the country after the war?
Well, in World War I, most of it was fought in Belgium, where they don't have a lot of vineyards, or Champagne, where they just had trenches and pretty much destroyed a lot of the vineyards, unfortunately. But they were, replanted after the war. In World War II, I don't know that there was a lot of vineyards that were destroyed. There was actually a book written called Wine and War, and it's all about stories of World War II, of how people in Europe dealt with the occupation. And some of the people hid their wine. But I recommend that book if you want to learn more about it. It's called Wine and War.
Okay.
I forget the author, but there was a lot of. I mean, one of the stories they talked about was when Germans occupied Paris. Famously Hitler came marching in. When they were leaving, he gave the order to flatten Paris, but the German commander there was a guy named Claude Taittinger who was a champagne maker. He had befriended this guy, and he was accused in some ways of being a collaborator because they were selling champagne to the Germans. He said not their good stuff, but they were selling it to him. But he got wind of this, and he went to this guy because he had a relationship with him. It shows how complex life is. And he said,
no question.
He said, do you want to be the guy who's remembered as the guy who gave the order to destroy Paris? And the guy said, I don't think so. And he left, and he disobeyed the order.
Something as simple as that, huh?
Yeah. I mean,
that one conversation saved the city.
But that guy, it's very controversial because, Taittinger was confused, kind of accused of being a collaborator. He had some entree into talking to, obviously, a guy who was the enemy. There was a lot of that going on in World War II, the moral ambiguities and collaboration, resistance. And all over France, you see memorials to people who were killed resisting. Even in that little town of Raveniere, there's a statue. My grandfather was in World War I. In World War II, there were people who were captured by the Nazis and executed there for resisting. So, you think about what we go through every day.
Right.
We're not dealing with putting your life literally on, unless you're a cop or a fireman, in your everyday life, resisting an occupying force. So that's a pretty strange thing. But,
we couldn't even fathom that today in today's society.
Not really. But, that Wine and War is a good book.
Okay.
So I recommend that. But so those are the trips, and I have another one planned for May. I'm going to go back to Burgundy again with a group, a tour this time. But
more for the book?
This is some of it, but it's more for the tour.
Okay.
But I have material I need for the book,
Okay.
But I did want to lead into this discussion of the tariffs.
Yes, please do.
Such a boring thing you want to talk about. But
no, I want to hear it from you.
What's so important because, as I mentioned, most people are willing to spend maybe between $10 and $20. But, what's going on now is there's a proposal to put a 100% tariff on all imported European wines. Initially, there was a 25% tariff, which was imposed back in, I guess it was October, and that was just on French wines. But now it's going to be the proposal 100% on all European wines, many cheeses. That's not a European cheese, but olive oil. You can see the list again at daveswinecellar.com. I wrote an article urging people to oppose the tariff. Now, probably when people hear this show, it'll be after the comment period, which is January 13th, 2020 is when it ends. And then they're going to make a decision whether to 100%. And the reason why they're doing it is the Europeans are clearly in violation in a whole different sector. What they do is they subsidize the Airbus commercial airplanes, which competes with Boeing, our major producer. And it's clear the World Trade Organization determined that they violated that, and the U.S. has the right to impose tariffs and retribution to try to get them to come off of that. The other thing that the U.S. Trade Representative doesn't like, and they're proposing a separate tariff, is that the Europeans are now going to tax Google, Facebook, and Amazon 5%. It's called a digital services tax. Actually, I think it's 3%.
Okay.
So that's the other thing that the U.S. Trade Representative is trying to get the Europeans to back off of. But the latter one may be just in France. But it's such to me, a misguided, blunt instrument to use. Now, what can happen if there's 100% tariff on wines? Well, in order to get, and these are two of them I brought, which I'm going to leave this one for you with raisins Gauloise. This one is a good one, a Gamay, and then this is the one you have in your glass here. By the way, cheers. Let's chin on that one. Good health, man.
Good health, my friend. And thank you.
You're welcome. This is a Beaujolais Village by Vignoble Bulliat, which is a family Bulliat, Bulliat, available at the PLCB currently for $12.99.
Oh my gosh!
All right?
Really?
$12.99.
Amazing.
It's really delicious.
And that's what we're drinking now.
Yeah. It's good. Easy drinking.
Oh my gosh!
Very fruity, well balanced. can drink that either by itself or with cheese, smooth, or with a meal. So $12.99. But if you have to pay $25 for this, you start saying like, geez, maybe there's something else I can buy. Maybe I'll buy some beer instead of this, which is what will happen.
Be a travesty.
No, I mean I love beer. I see the beer over here.
Yeah, we've had some beer folks on since your last visit.
I can't drink beer anymore, but that's a whole nother health issue. So I like wine, but and I don't think beer has been part of the tariff regime.
Okay.
It's just the wine so far.
Okay.
Ciders are included as well.
Okay.
Proposal. But so, what happens is when an importer is bringing a bottle like this into the U.S., they cut a deal. They place a purchase order with the producer in Beaujolais. They send put it on a truck. They put it on a boat. It goes to Philadelphia or New York.
Okay.
They clear customs, and then they get the product. Then they distribute it either to retailers. In Pennsylvania, it's the PLCB is the retailer. In New York, you have private retailers. 45,000 retail shops in the U.S. selling wine.
Wow.
And they sell it. And once the distributor does that, they get the money to then pay the producer. It's on a 90-day contract. That's how it usually works. But if now there's 100% tariff, you have to pay 100% of the purchase order price to the government before you even get the money to pay the producer. If you had to do that in your business, you can't do it.
It's egregious.
It will put not French producers out of business. It'll put U.S. importers, distributors, retailers out of business. And I did the U.S. Wine Retailers Organization. Did a letter opposing this, and I opposed it as well. And I think last time I checked, there were over 15,000 comments opposing this imposition. If you go to the regulations, that I have the link at the article I wrote on daveswinestar.com. But they estimate if this 100% tariff goes through, that there'll be a loss, $10.6 billion loss in revenue. And up to 78,000 jobs in the U.S. that would be eliminated, and because right now there are 47,000 retail shops which they estimate 200,000 people, 65,000 importers and distributors which employ another estimated 200,000 people.
Right.
So out of that 400,000, they estimate 78,000 jobs would be lost, because they don't just import and distribute European wines, but a significant amount of it is. And there's some importers, small importers and distributors who have been in business maybe 20, 30 years.
Right.
And they only do European wines.
Okay.
And there's some wine bars that maybe just do European wines.
Sure.
They'll be out of business because if they can't get the inventory, if you can't pay clear customs, get the goods in here, and then sell it, you're out of business. If you don't have any inventory. It's that simple. So,
a 100% tariff, it's just unheard of.
I don't get it. It would be, they say up to. Now, some people are saying that this is, by the time this is aired, this show, there'll be a determination as to whether they actually impose the 100%. But I do know that representatives of Google, Facebook, and Amazon, as well as from Boeing, testified and urged them to do this 100%. To me, there should be retaliatory tariffs in the digital services industry or in the airline industry. But why do you pick on innocent people, hardworking people? It might be, part of it, Eric, might be prohibitionism, could be neo-prohibitionism,
could be,
because it's easy to pick on wine, and to most people it's not, they either drink it, they take it, or leave it. I don't know how many people actually, percentage of the population, drink wine, but for those who enjoy it, it's to me, I don't know what
100% tariff on anything is unfathomable to me. If that isn't egregious, I can't. I remember in high school and college when I took economics, they said, during the Depression, they tried tariffs to, do protectionism and to fight their way out of the Depression, but it only made it worse. Absolutely.
I mean, did you not hear that?
Oh, yeah.
Right?
I think, there's a lot of issues when it comes to taxation. We're not going to go down an economic hole, but and I'm not for complete deregulation of our society either. But I will tell you, it's been proven time and time again that when you pull back tax rates, when you pull back on tariffs, generally the economy will spur. But it seems to be at a loss, I think, with most politicians from both parties. I don't think it resonates with them. They're all drunk on our money,
I guess.
So,
well, another thing I learned about the tariffs, with China, there were tariffs placed on China,
right,
because they weren't buying, I guess, soybeans and other things. So the Chinese retaliated by putting an 80% tariff on American wines. So American wine exports to China have dropped precipitously. Let's say the 100% goes on the French and European wines. Guess what they're going to do? They're going to start shipping their wine to China.
No question.
And the demand in China, because the middle class is growing.
Sure.
So the Europeans, in the short term, they're going to be hurt, but they're going to adapt.
They'll recover.
And if they start selling their wine to China, it's going to be tough to get it back here. And it's such a scary thing, because once you lose the infrastructure that I talked about, the distributors and importers,
you just can't turn that back on overnight.
You can't just turn it back on.
Right.
So
Right.
Sucks, man. It sucks big time. But that's my little soapbox. So I urge anyone who's listening to this to, you can go to my website or just put wine tariffs, and even after January 2020, keep track of it, because that's the way to, express your opinion and oppose it. I mean, I'm not a big political resistance opposed guy,
Me neither.
But that, I sent a letter to the US Trade Representative. You can do it online. And I
do you think you believe it's simply just, at this point though, it's a threat because of other nonsense going on with Boeing and Airbus? Do you think that's what it is? That's
supposedly the idea. That's what they say, and they're going to do. But they, if they impose it, it will be the comment period ends January 13th, and they could impose it as soon as February 2020.
Oh my!
There are people who they can't sleep at night. A lot of people I know who are small importers and distributors, they're going to have to lay off. I mean, maybe they have some inventory, maybe they have some, working capital reserve, but if you miss 1-2 cycles of having inventory,
no question,
you're crushed, man. I mean, they're not making millions and millions of dollars in their businesses. They might be, small businesses that do it because they have a passion.
Sure.
They work with small producers who aren't producing a lot. Like, I don't know this producer how much they do, but who's the importer here? This is Elateni Imports in New York. But, I'm sure that by definition, a wine like this that's not mass-produced, not industrial, this is an agricultural product, organically grown.
Right.
They don't do any chemical applications. They harvest by hand, and they do it in a way that provides a very pure, delicious product. By definition, it's not a widget. It's something that you have to work hard to do.
Correct.
And we just, here's another way to look at it. When you go in the PLCB store and you see they have signs up, France, Spain, Italy, shelf upon shelf of wines there, you could see either blank shelves, or the wines that would be there would be twice the price. And they're also talking about spirits. So, you talk about cognac, Scotch whiskey, all that stuff. So it's just insane. I don't mean to be an alarmist, but to me...
No. That's a 100% tariff on anything is
hand me
really
your glass
egregious.
back, because before we depart this topic, and I do want to move on, but I want to do a little experiment here.
Sure.
Okay? Got to hand this back to you.
No worries.
Now, you see that glass, right?
I sure do.
That's a nice wine glass you might see in a restaurant. In fact, I used to use that same glass in my old restaurant.
Okay.
Bridge 10 Brasserie. Pour myself a little bit more. But... there's another glass there.
There is.
Okay?
There is.
So I want you to look at these and see if you see any difference in what you taste. This is what the old paisans in Arnold, New Kensington, when they had their homemade wine, probably Coriopolis too. You got a few here, right?
Oh, yeah.
Right? The old tumbler glass, the water glass.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Is it the same wine?
Same one. I should have told you. I should have done a
blind taste test.
See if it tastes better one way or the other. That tastes pretty good.
That tastes pretty good.
Let's see this one. About the same.
I prefer it out of the...
Yeah, I like it too. Yeah, but I don't mind this. Like I'm sitting around with friends or at home, sometimes. I mean, what the heck? I just show you that because you don't have to have fancy stemware.
No.
And you don't have to spend a lot of money.
No, you don't. You've proven that to me. I've learned that from this show, but in the prior show as well, too. Amazing.
So that's $12.99. This one
incredible.
Is from the same region, Marcel Lapierre, Raisin Gauloise, which just means French grapes. And it's kind of funny,
I like the label.
Another organic producer, all hand grown, no chemicals, what have you.
So that means there's no sulfites in there, right?
No, a little bit, but not a lot.
Okay.
They add that's a good point because they very minimally. You need some sulfites to preserve the freshness of the wine like that. Some of them do it without any sulfites added, but they add a little bit. This one's $15.99 in the state store.
So incredible.
But it would be $30. And I mean, it'd be such a shame to have a bottle like this have to. You wouldn't. I don't even know if we would still get it. It probably would go to China.
There isn't. You don't think the American growers, grape growers lobby's involved with that at all? Do you think?
Well, the other thing is, it's fun. A lot of people said that. Well, maybe this will be good for American grape growers, but some of those same distributors, most of them don't do 100% European distribution.
Okay.
They might do, 40, 50% American wines, what have you, but they need the entire spectrum to stay in business. If you even lose half of those distributors, it's going to hurt American producers. Now, the big guys like Gallo, they're not. It won't. It's like being on a cruise ship or an ocean liner. If they take a hit on the side, it bounces off and they keep going. But if you're in a little boat and, you might sink if you take the same kind of wave, or it might flood over you.
Correct.
So there's a lot of small producers. Not every producer in America is a Gala. There are a lot of small producers, and they need to go with small distributors. So if the small distributors aren't there, it's going to hurt them.
Absolutely.
So most American wineries, I haven't heard anybody thinking like, oh boy, this is great for us.
Yeah, that's a good idea, right.
I have heard that, maybe some South American producers might think that they might have a bit of a niche because if the European wines aren't coming in. But
your Chilean wines.
But I like Argentinian wines. I like Chilean wines. I like Uruguayan wines. But they are different from European wines. I like variety. I like diversity.
Sure.
California wines aren't French or Spanish or Italian wines.
Right.
South American wines, Australian wines, they all have a different character.
Right.
Why would you want to eliminate a place that's been making wine for 2,000 years? I mean, come on. Those are some of the best wines in the world.
And it's been revered as one of the best places
in South
wine
America,
comes from.
Australia, California. They all emulate the wines. They have their own style.
Right.
And they're good, not bad. I'm not poo-pooing them and saying, but I don't know, man. It's crazy. I just wanted to mention
100% of any tax is insane to me. It's unfathomable.
A lot of insane stuff these days, but that's just one of them. So tariffs, tariffs.
You got that right.
Okay, so that's these two, and then I also wanted to mention tonight another place which I just wrote about this in the Pittsburgh Tribune Review, my wine column. You can get my columns there too if you go to triblive.com, put in my name, Dave DeSimone, and wine, and they all pop up. But I wanted to write about, I do this every once in a while, the Charimain selection program. Do you know about those wines?
I do not.
Okay. So there was a chairman of the PLCB in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania government is the seller of wines, all right? It's a monopoly.
You don't say.
It is. It's a lot better than it used to be.
Right.
There's been a lot of real improvements, and one of the big improvements along the way was this gentleman by the name of Jonathan Newman, who was the chairman of the PLCB, the Pennsylvania Liquor Control Board.
Okay.
And he said, being a business guy, he said, look, Pennsylvania is the biggest wine buyer in the world. I think they've been surpassed now by maybe Costco. Yeah, I mean, think about it. You have 695, I think it is, retail shops in Pennsylvania. They got to buy wine for all of those.
Okay.
So there's huge buying power. So he said, we're not using our buying power to leverage deals. So I'm going to go out. And he recognized that a lot of wineries, there's more wine in the world than necessarily there are places to sell it. And he said that, if there's a winery that has excess inventory of a particular vintage, and or for whatever reason they need cash, what have you, go out and shake the bushes. And he went to California first because there's a real glutton back in 2004 in California.
Okay.
And he bought initially like the entire remaining vintage inventory of a Cabernet from a Napa producer at maybe 15 cents on the dollar.
Wow.
And then sold it in Pennsylvania at a price 25 cents.
Right.
And it was like 50% less than the national retail price.
Right.
The producer was happy because they moved their warehouse.
Absolutely.
They could bring in their new vintage. They didn't have to rent new warehouse space. Got an injection of cash, albeit at a, sometimes you got to do what you got to do. You need some cash, and they sold it. And in Pennsylvania, consumers reaped the benefits. So
certainly. Really
big, good program. So Newman then retired, and a gentleman by the name of Steve Pollock, who I mentioned to you before, he took over, and he expanded the Charimain selection program into European wines, South American wines, sparkling wines, and he has a palate that is really kind of like full throttle. He likes big-bodied, full-bodied wines, and so he got a lot of really good wines and expanded the program. And now there's a new gentleman by the name of Josh Hull, I believe is his name.
Okay.
I have to check that, and he is further expanding it. But so when you go into a what's called a specialty store or a premium selection store.
Yes.
They have those in
Swickley has
15 of them. There's Swickley, Shadyside,
Mount
Lebanon. I don't know. And I think Cochrane Road, it's at, what's the shopping center? What's it called? I can't remember. The one, you have one in McKenna, you have one in... not Green Tree, but anyway, if you go online, premium selection stores, they have the expanded inventory. There's one downtown on Fifth Avenue.
Right.
Big selection. They carry all the Charimain selections. You'll see them stacked out in the front of the store. Very easy to see them. And there's other select stores. And in the article I just wrote in the Tribune Review, there's a page that you can go to at the Pennsylvania Liquor Control Board website. It's called PA Fine Wines and Spirits. And they have all the Charimain selections listed, and with their inventory code, their SKU number. You click on that number, and then you put in the county, and it shows you where all the availability is. So it's very easy to do that.
Got it.
But they put them right in the front of the store. You actually stumble over them, So two of the ones that are in the store now, which I thought were really good, is for example this one from Italy. It's from Alianico de Voltura, which is in Basilicata. And if you know the Italian peninsula, the boot, comes down like this with the toe and then the heel. This is in the arch of the boot. That's in for Basilicata, southern Italy. Okay. So very sunny Mediterranean place. It's a red wine. And this wine, and I looked it up online on winesearcher.com, $30 retails around the country, $12.99.
Incredible.
Yeah, here in Pennsylvania. And they bought a lot of it because what happened was I did a little research on it. This winery, Reggio Cantina, it's called.
Okay.
They sold to a company out of Tuscany.
Right.
And when the new company came in, they had some inventory on hand, this 2014 vintage. Perfectly good wine, but it hadn't been sold yet.
Right.
So they said, we got to move this.
Right.
The Pennsylvania Liquor Control Board bought their entire inventory. Some of it had been sold. It was imported. That process we talked about earlier came to America. And was selling at $30, but they bought it at such a price because they bought the entire inventory.
And they said $12.95?
$12.99.
That's crazy to me. Yeah.
Might be $1 more than that. I'm not sure, but it's 50% discount from what the retail is, and it's excellent. It's a big full body wine, 14% alcohol. Use the Alianico grape, and delicious. I mean, I opened up a bottle when I did the article, had it open for 3 days. It started getting better because it's such a big wine that it needs some time to open up. It's still relatively young, 2014 vintage, but so there's one that is just outstanding. But if the tariff goes into effect, I would bollocks all this up again as well. But putting that aside, the Charimain selection, this is an excellent example. That's one. That's for you.
Oh, thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Unless
we drink it before the end of the show.
We may.
And then this wine I really, really liked. It's called Domaine Vetrici. It's from Corsica, which is actually France. It's an island in the Mediterranean. It's from the Vermentino grape. And again, this one is, I think, maybe $13.99.
Oh, my.
Both of them are just absolute steals. This one, this one is a big ripe and red with dark fruit and kind of leathery, smoky, earthy, like you want to have a steak with this one. This one is like this very ripe, but you can't believe it might come out of a wine, but it reminded me exactly of like honeysuckle in the summertime, that beautiful floral.
Right.
It's hard to describe, but this wine has
Interesting.
Along with like citrus tangerine and some ripe peach, but really good acidity. It's not flabby at all. And just a great wine from Corsica. So I'm a big fan of the Charimain selection. Steve did a lot of really good stuff with it, and the new guy is carrying it on. And there must be...
It's a great concept, though.
Absolutely. And I give Jonathan Newman credit because, they did some of it beforehand, but he really took it to the next level, and he did something important. He branded it.
Smart.
I mean, if you talk to people,
smart.
A lot of people know about Charimain selection, and they are happy with the results.
I think I've seen there's placards when you go in. Right.
It has different color.
Right.
Different set of numbers on the SKUs.
Right.
And it's called Charimain selection. So that's one tip I recommend everybody look at. This one's not in the Charimain selection, but these are two good deals as well. So
for the money, unbelievable.
There's a lot of really good deals. I mean, I've been making my wine writing bones to some degree, writing about that for the last 20 years because people like that. There's this tendency to badmouth the PLCB, but like a lot of things, it's improved without even people really. It's kind of migrated towards improvement. And I travel all over the country. I mean, you go to a Total Wine store or you go to a Costco, they don't have nearly the presentation of most PLCB stores.
I believe that.
And these are as good a deals or better deals than you'll get anywhere in the country. And I'm not like being paid by the PLCB.
Well, sure.
I'm just calling a spade, man. And so if smart people will go and say, take advantage like anything else. Anytime you see a deal, it doesn't matter where you find it, take advantage of it.
From your experience, what goes into pricing a wine? So, case in point, you and I buy an existing vineyard, let's say in Erie, PA.
Okay.
And, you knowing so much more about it than me, you determine the kind of grapes and you determine what we're going to grow. How would someone price their wine? Like, you can say, well, it's the market. Well, it's always the market. But what makes a $300 bottle of wine, or someone asking $300 for a bottle of wine, as opposed to a $14 bottle of wine?
part of it is branding. Whether you have a brand. I mean,
right.
That's a big part of it.
I'm sure.
Is it perceived as a luxury brand? And part of it is, supply and demand, which is to some degree demand is driven by the brand.
Okay.
So, for example, Lake Erie, there are some really good wines being made. I go up every once in a while, and Mazza Vineyards, Courtyard Vineyards, 6 Mile Vineyards. But their brand overall is still not as prestigious, let's say, as or well known as a Beaujolais.
Got it. Got it.
Most of the grapes in Lake Erie go actually to Concord grapes to Welch's for grape juice.
Okay.
Juice and jellies.
And jelly.
Right?
Okay.
90% of the grapes there grown go to Welch's for juice or jelly.
Okay.
But they use a lot of the growers since 1960. Before that, they weren't allowed to have wineries because of prohibition.
Got it.
It took the Pennsylvania legislature to allow them to do what they call farm wineries.
Okay.
So it's relatively young. So their brand, compared to, let's say, Bordeaux or Burgundy, which has been working for 2,000 years, since the Roman times, they got a real kick in the teeth with prohibition. But they're building it up, and so and another, who knows? I mean, it takes some breakthroughs. Like, for example, I'll give you an example, Eric. Finger Lakes in New York. Back when I started an interest in wine in the 80s and 90s, they still had a reputation of being kind of like sweet wines, not really great table wines. But now, 2020. The Finger Lakes is popping. It's hot. I mean, there are hundreds of wineries there now. They're making Pinot Noir, Riesling. So it took a while, 40 years,
right,
for them to build up that reputation. And Pennsylvania is working on that. I forget how many wineries there are in Pennsylvania, but it's in the hundreds.
You told me last time.
Yeah. And most of them, 90% of their offerings are sweet wines. That's how they stay in business. Fruit wines, blended wines like Concord or, local grape varieties.
Like
not so much fortified wines, but sweet wines.
Okay.
And that's fine. I mean, people go there, they buy a bottle of wine, they have a good time.
Right.
But there is a growing niche of dry table wine. So that goes to your point about pricing.
Okay.
So there are, for example, with Courtyard, you can buy a Merlot for $20 or $25. They might only make a few hundred cases of that, but they're selling it.
Right.
Mazza has some, wines from European varieties where they might be $15 to $20. There's wineries. I discovered one recently from Eastern PA. I wrote about it. This is horrible. It's tough getting older.
That's all right. Yeah,
Can't
tell me about it.
But I found a really, really good one that is offered at Cinderlands. You know Cinderlands?
Why do I know that
They
name?
make beer.
Yeah.
In Lawrenceville and in the Strip. Okay. They also have a really good wine program. Cinderlands.
Okay.
And they had this winery. I can't remember of it now, but it's in Eastern PA. Something Cellars. It's horrible. But they use German varieties because it's cold in eastern central Pennsylvania. So I mean, and Austrian varieties like Zweigelt. They used Riesling, Gruner Veltliner, things that they are figuring out. Where they can grow good table wines, but they still stay in business by selling sweet wines. They still do that.
Okay.
But it is possible, and probably in another 15, 20 years they'll be obviously different. So your question was about the pricing.
Right. How do you set it? I mean
they're going to get whatever they can get. I mean,
right.
I think most of the sweet wines you see are like between $10 and $15. People will pay that. But I don't.
So they need volume. They need volume to stay in business.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I don't delve too much into the business side of it. I mean, that's why this whole tariff thing for me is unusual, but it's an alarm to see. You know, I'm kind of dealing in an Eden paradise situation where you just buy the wines, drink them, talk about what they go with the food, and you either like the price or you don't, you know. Mm-hmm. But, you know, but I'll give you another example, Burgundy, as I was talking about earlier. Right. When I started buying Burgundies back in the early, late 80s, early 90s, you could buy the very top wines for maybe $100, and then the lower wines, you know, down to $10, $5, even under 10. Okay. Now those wines, the regional wines, may be between 10 and 20, you know, maybe $25. Okay. Whereas the Grand Cru wines have gone to $300-$400. Why? Well, one thing that's changed between the late 80s and 90s and now is there are markets in Japan, China, Korea, India. They weren't buying Burgundy 30 years ago.
Got it. More demand then.
Global trade. Again, you know, that's a theme of our discussion tonight.
No question.
You know, and China is a huge buyer of European wines now. So, and Burgundy is a very small place. The vineyards are finite. So, you know, from a particular vineyard, maybe, you know, I don't know, you pick any one of them, any of the Grand Crus or Premier Crus, you may only have a few hundred cases at most. Wow. So, you know, maybe some come here, maybe some go there. And one of my favorite producers, Domaine Dujac, D-U-J-A-C, the guy who founded it was Jacques Cess, so he said, Dujac, you know. I used to buy those wines in the 90s. That was kind of like the golden era of buying Burgundy. They're top wines. They're Grand Crus for $100 or less. Okay. Now they're $500-$600.
Incredible.
I can't buy those wines, which is another reason why I've migrated towards these regional wines.
Understood.
Because a producer that makes a really good Grand Cru or Premier Cru, they want to make a really good introductory level Bourgogne because that's like a business card. Most people are going to drink that wine. Right. So if you find the producers who have a good introductory wine, got it, and your wallet's not fat that you're going to pay $500 a bottle. Right. When you can't afford the Grand Cru,
got it,
you go to Aligote.
I got it.
You know? A good Aligote though, not a cheap one.
I got it. What?
Aligote is my go-to when I can't afford a Grand Cru.
I like that.
I do too.
Your new rap line.
Oh man, yeah.
So growing up, it was always the thing you see on TV. It'd be a well-to-do dinner, and people were sitting down, and the maitre d' was bringing over the wine list or bring over wine samples. And you know, this is a 1972, and it's a good vintage. How does that work? So with certain, I'm assuming with red wines, certain wines, the longer they're bottled, or were certain years known as being better grapes in those years? How's that vintage thing work in terms of the years and what year it's bottled and so forth?
Most wines, that's irrelevant. You know, like the
the
Bourgogne wines that I told you about. Bottom of the pyramid. Right. You can buy those and pop the cork and drink them maybe after 1 year, 2 years or less, you know. But some of the top pinnacle wines, not only from Burgundy, but from Bordeaux, from anywhere, California, Australia, if they get some aging in the cellar, they tend to get smoother and they improve, as they're called. And every wine that is not a wine meant to be drink youthful. They have what's called like a life cycle, whereas you know it goes up to a plateau, kind of plateaus, it matures and gets mellow, and then it stays on a plateau, and eventually it ages and falls off, and you pull the cork, it might be oxidized or too old, or not very pleasurable to drink. Okay. So there are some wines that you need to wait maybe 10, 15 years. You know, it depends on...
That's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of California wines, the big Cabernets, it takes some time. They might be too tannic and astringent when they're young, or too not alcoholic, but too just overwhelming. I don't know about you. I mean, man, I'm not looking to drink something overwhelming when I have a glass of wine. I want something mellow and nice,
like we had tonight.
Like this, right?
Absolutely, right.
It's easy to drink.
Right.
Some of those top wines, if you pull the cork too young, it's like infanticide. They're not going to be pleasurable to drink.
Got it.
And too many wines like that are drunk too soon. But it being a marketplace, I mean, people will do what they're going to do.
Yeah, there was always the thing. This year was a good vintage. I never.
No.
As a little kid, you're watching it going, "What the hell does that mean?"
Well, in certain places, it depends on the grape variety too. Like Pinot Noir, which they use in Burgundy. Burgundy traditionally has been kind of a marginal climate for growing grapes.
Okay.
But the monks who started developing these vineyards, they did, monks, in 900s, 800s, 900s.
Right.
And they didn't have a lot to do on there. They had a motto. Their motto of the monks was labora and ora, which means to work and to pray. That's what they did.
That's it.
They would work in the vineyards and pray. But interestingly, the order of Saint Benedict, the Cistercians and the Benedictines, they have what the rule of Saint Benedict, and part of the rule of Saint Benedict is because they had to work, physical labor, as well as pray, they had the right to drink a half a bottle of wine a day. So they had to produce wine.
Got it.
And that was kind of a way to attract people into the order as well. That,
sure.
It wasn't all, you worked, you had a community, you prayed, if you believe in your immortal soul, that was one way to do it. But if you have that much labor and time on your hands, they figured out in detail in Burgundy and all over France exactly what grapes to grow where the sun hits, what the soils are. And they didn't do it necessarily scientifically, but through the ages, they figured out what went.
Trial and error,
right. They had a lot of time to do it. And it was funny because in Burgundy, where they would have the Grand Crus, the Premier Crus, the village wines, and then the regional wines.
Right.
The Grand Crus, they said, those are the wines for the cardinals and the Pope. The Premier Crus were for the bishops. The village wines were for the brothers, the brothers. And then everything else was for the common folk.
Got it.
That weren't in the... in the organization. They weren't made men. They got to drink everything else.
The made men.
But it was good stuff, So, but the thing about it is, they figured out, these monks, that the way to get really good wine is to find the place, and this is tied into global climate change.
Okay.
To plant grapes where they would just grow in a way that had perfect balance between acidity, ripeness, and create something very special in the glass.
Okay.
So certain grapes, like for example, Pinot Noir does well in Burgundy. Syrah does well in the Northern Rhone, which is just below that.
All right.
Southern Rhone, they have Grenache, Mourvedre, and Syrah as well. And then they figured out where to do all this stuff. And France, Italy, the same thing.
Right.
Germany, they figured that out. Riesling, because that's a marginal climate. And when you do that, if and this is part of California's big challenge, anything they plant there grows. They don't have to worry about picking grapes in not ripening. Right. It always ripens. Not so in France. France, Italy to a lesser degree, Spain certainly to a lesser degree, but Germany, France, a lot of those places are marginal climates for growing grapes. So in marginal climates for growing grapes, vintages make a big difference.
Got it.
So that's how that all came about.
Got it. Mainly
from France, to some degree from Germany, to some degree from Italy, because one year might have been sunnier, and so that was, they had what were called, great vintages. Other years it may have rained during the harvest.
I see. So it is year specific then.
Yes. And now as climate change has come, and you can say what you want about why climate change is happening. It's absolutely happening because wine growers tell me that, even people in our contemporaries, that from when they're in their youth, they've seen differences between when the buds would come out on the vines and when they would flower.
Right.
Accelerating like 3 weeks, 4 weeks.
Well, they would know.
Absolutely.
They would know.
And sometimes they actually have to harvest in a couple of extreme cases, like 2003, in August as opposed to September. And they have meticulous records in Burgundy dating back 900 years. Every harvest of when it occurred, and in 2003 was the earliest harvest in like 3 times in 900 years did they harvest in August.
Wow.
But now it's becoming more common, because it's heating up.
Right.
It really is heating up.
Right.
So it's a good thing, but I was telling you about like Syrah being in the Northern Rhone, Pinot Noir. And at one point in England, they had extensive vineyards, but then there was a mini ice age and they lost all their vineyards. But now as it's warming up, you're seeing vineyards again in southeastern England. They're starting to grow sparkling wine.
That was actually my next question.
Well, there you go.
I was going to say, you mentioned last time you were here that there was vineyards in every state of the union.
That's true.
And I was thinking about a place as you wouldn't think as a wine exporter, which would be England. But you're just telling me there are vineyards in England.
It's growing in the last 20 years significantly.
Really?
Yeah. Now, you take Pennsylvania, right?
Okay.
This winter we've had so far, how many days have we had below freezing? We had one today, right?
Not many.
But we've had a few.
Couple, yeah.
But what's going to happen this weekend? It's going to be in the 60s,
I
right?
know.
The difference between Pennsylvania and Northern California is they have days where they go below freezing, even nights, all right? But every day it warms up above freezing.
Got it.
There's never a day that they stay below 32 degrees.
Right.
When we were kids, what would you have, even like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, a week, 2 weeks at a time where it stays below 32 degrees. European grapevines can't survive in a climate where you have 2 or 3 weeks below freezing. They have to be above freezing.
Got it.
But, for a place like Pennsylvania, as the climate warms, it could be good for us. I mean, who knows? I mean, maybe my grandkids, and I do have one granddaughter now. Did you know that?
I did not.
Yeah, June, she was born. Evelyn. Oh, it's fantastic. Whole nother story.
Congratulations, my friend.
Thank you very much. I mean, it's just such a thrill, but more fun than I could ever imagine.
Yeah, and you're just getting started?
Oh, my God. She's 7 months old now. But my point is that maybe in her lifetime, it could be in Pennsylvania that you're growing successfully European grape varieties.
Right.
And it could be in places like, where you're doing it now, like, for example, Spain.
It's crazy.
They're worried about not being able to grow what they traditionally have grown because it's growing hot as Hades.
Absolutely.
And in large parts of it.
Absolutely.
And in France even, to me this would break my heart, but they're talking about in Burgundy, in anticipating in future generations, they might not be able to grow Pinot Noir anymore. They may have to grow Syrah, which is the variety that currently grows in the area just below Burgundy, the Northern Rhone.
Right.
It may go progressively northward as the climate heats up. So at the end of the day, the sun's going to expand. I saw this on WQED the other. I got real depressed watching this, and there might be a moon around Jupiter where we can all live, but, what are we going to do, Eric?
I think you and I have powered me long gone by then.
Real estate's going to be tough, brother.
Could be. Well, very much so. I had, a week or two ago, we had Dr. Ira Rothstein. He's the CMU theoretical physics professor.
I saw that, yeah.
He was wonderful, and I can't wait for his next trip in. And he was, it was one of those situations where I had a little trepidation as I had reaching out to you the first time, which I've learned was ridiculous. But when I reached out to you, I had the same timidity that when I reached out to him, because you're both very astute in your fields, and he was phenomenal. You would have loved to have been here for that. Yeah, he
real
was,
for you.
And he basically took very complex things like you have done with wine and made it more palatable. Because we talked about this last time you were here, in that it's intimidating, and it was many times in my life going into a quote-unquote upscale or fancy restaurant and not understanding the wine list.
Right.
And not even having a basic understanding of it. And, you know, it's so good, it needs to be accessible to so many more people.
Yeah.
And it is price-wise, but I think even understanding the different types of grapes has gone a long way for me to understanding the different types of flavors as well, too.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's this kind of thing where it's always good to take a course to study it to some degree.
Sure.
Most people, I think we talked about this last time, and producers know this. Most people, it may not be just about wine, but most people have maybe 5 to 10 go-to wines that they want to know whether they're going to a restaurant. And I have that too. I mean, like, for example, I like this wine. You know, the one we had, the Beaujolais Village from Bouillard from I forget the name of the young guy who's making it now. I think it's Loic Bouillard. But I like this wine. I know the label. It's I like this wine. I like the Raisin Gaulois from La Pierre. You see this one in the restaurants quite a bit, and it's they do a pretty good volume of that. These Charimain selection wines are more one-offs, you know.
Got it.
Like, I've never seen this in a restaurant, but I tried it and I liked it, and you got to ride it as long as it's there in the store. It's like, get it now because it's going to be disappearing.
Well, it's good marketing too. If we end up buying in volume and you get introduced to it at $12, if you really like it, you won't mind paying $30 for it.
And you might remember the label. I mean, there's a whole, theory of having memorable labels on wine marketing.
Interesting.
I did see, though, that they have done a prior vintage of this one in the Charimain selection program, this Reggio Cantina Don Pa Alianico. So
you love saying those words, don't you? You're so good at it. You're so fluid with it.
I let it roll, you know. But it's fun. It's fun. I mean, I've spent really, you know, we're talking about it professionally. I've done legal work, I've done real estate work, but I've also had this whole side gig of writing about wine, studying wine, and I've done it basically my entire life. So it's like, you know, the whole theory of like 10,000 hours. I don't know how many hours.
Oh, you're well over that probably.
I may be, but I do know this. For example, when I'm writing a chapter in that book or when I'm writing an article, I could do 5 or 6 hours and I don't look at the clock once. It's truly amazing. I say to myself, like when I wrote the article about the Charimain selections, I mean, I do the research, I do my tasting notes, I try the wines, and then, you know, I write some of it, and I maybe sit down on a Sunday, and then I rewrite it. But you know, I'll maybe start writing at 11 o'clock. Next thing you know, it's 6 o'clock.
But you have passion for it.
It's a pleasure for me. It's like, you know, I mean, anything for me, this is a creative outlet, and you know, do a good job of anything creatively, it's not just inspiration, it's work, study. You know, you do need some inspiration and connecting the dots, and you know, like anything like that. But you know, so it's the same thing. Like for me, when I go and look at a wine list, any restaurant, for me, that's fun time. You know, I look at that wine list and I want to see what's on there. And sometimes I'll say, wow, man, somebody was thinking here. They put a little nugget on here, you know, and that kind of thing. And it can be fun. But you got to take classes. And, you know, I think that it's all a question of how much time you want to spend, you know, how important it is. And most people, like I said, I always remind myself, that's why I think this column I've done has been successful, because they can tap into it.
Certainly.
And they're not going to, you know, I'm creating value for them.
You're almost a curator. You've curated the experience for them.
In a way. You might look, that's a good point. Yeah, it's true. I wouldn't disagree with that. And you know, I know friends have made friends through writing the column, and they're like, "Wow, man, yeah, thanks for that tip. I've tried that wine." Like when I wrote this column, there were some comments, and I always post it on Facebook. And somebody said, "Well, you know, I like this one. I've been buying the hell out of this, hitting this hard, but there's this one from South Africa in the Charimain selection. I'm going to go out and try that one." From my buddy Adam, who is he just started a business. he calls his business Burgundy, Burgh. You know, like Berg, the Berg and D. You know, Burgundy.
Right.
Adam Krosnauer. He used to work for Pallet Partners. Do you know Pallet Partners?
I don't.
In the Strip. They were in the Strip. They're now in
The name's familiar. I don't know anybody.
Dreadnought Wines.
Yeah.
Okay. Dreadnought Wines and Pallet Partners.
Okay.
Which is Deb and Mike. He used to work for them as their wine educator. He's now, I think, still doing some classes for them. But he is here's a guy who, you know, his passion in part is South African wines. And he had a corporate background where he traveled all around the world. He had the opportunity to visit in South Africa. He's a guy you should get on your show.
Yeah, he sounds like a fascinating guy.
You want to talk to this guy. He's really, really... you know, I'm going to write an article. I'm going to interview him because we talked about doing that because I want to write about his story. But,
sure.
But for me, South Africa, I've tried the wines, but you know, it's always good to make those contacts and have your horizons expanded to some degree.
Well, on that point, have you ever walked into a restaurant, whether it's someplace you're familiar with or maybe a new restaurant, opened up the wine list and purposely wanted to go for something you've never had before?
Oh, yeah. I'll do that for sure. Yeah, no, like a grape variety. But, Eric, it's getting to the point where I'm pretty much trying them all, buddy.
That's not a bad problem to have.
No, I don't know. It sounds arrogant, but it's true.
I get it.
You know, it is what it is. I mean, you know, there'll be new producers, but yeah, there's always new varieties to try. But I mean, I've tried a lot of grape varieties. There is actually a club where you can, you know, check off different as you do things.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
I forget what it's called, but you know, like the 100 variety club or whatever. You know.
Are there countries out there that would surprise me if you told me there's wine coming from them, like the Netherlands? Is there wine from the Netherlands?
I was just telling before the show here. I was talking to one of my colleagues. They make something called, to me, this does not sound appealing, but she loves it, and I give merit to that.
Okay.
They make, because, you know, what are the Dutch famous for?
Shoes?
Shoes, but
the hole in the dike.
eating wise.
Oh,
Dutch,
cheese?
Chocolate.
Oh, chocolates. Oh my gosh, yes.
They make a chocolate wine. They have a red wine where somehow they put Dutch chocolate in it. It's one of the best-selling products in the PLCB.
Really?
It's called Choco Vine.
Now,
from Holland,
would they be importing the grapes up there to do that, or do you think they would grow the grapes?
I haven't tried it. I know they can't grow the grapes there. They can't grow the grapes there.
So the climate is not at all.
No, they make beer, they make cider, and but they somehow get the red wine and then make a Choco Vine.
About Sweden.
Sweden, I don't think they make any wine in Sweden. They probably do, like in Minnesota. You know, they have some backyard. I don't know the answer to that. I've never had a Swedish wine. I'll tell you places that or to be on the lookout for going forward are places in Eastern Europe. They drink so much wine there that we've never heard of. Really good wine.
Interesting.
Croatia.
Interesting.
Slovenia, Macedonia, Hungary is better known, but Romania, Bulgaria, those are kind of the future of as they, you know, at one point they were under like the Iron Curtain.
Right.
So we never saw the wines, but those are all places where the Romans were part of the Roman Empire, and wherever the Romans went, they put vineyards in because they're, you know, their troops, the Roman soldiers, they would drink that just like the monks did later.
Right.
The monks kind of latched on to where the Romans were. You know, the Romans came up, Caesar went into Gaul, conquered France, and everywhere he went, they brought actual agricultural discipline to growing grapes.
Got it.
Because before that time, it was just all wild grapevines. But the Romans, man, were organized. They were business guys, you know. And I've been to Vienna, which is a northern. It's fascinating, man. That was a wine depot in near Lyon, just below Lyon,
right?
Big city, second city of France,
right?
On the Rhone River,
right?
And they're excavating this extensive Roman. It was a Roman imperial outpost, and they had wherever they had an imperial outpost, they would build a temple. They would build a circus, commercial, for circuses and the gladiatorial games.
Right.
An amphitheater for the entertainment, and a commercial area. So this Vienne, which means wine, was a Roman outport, and they're excavating all these incredible mosaics that have been buried for over 1,500.
Sure.
Who knows how long?
Yeah.
But they made a deal after they conquered Caesar conquered them, and I learned this on a podcast. What the hell is that guy's name? Dan Carlin.
Okay, yeah, I know Dan.
Okay,
I know of Dan.
Yeah, and he talked, and when Caesar went in and conquered France, there were approximately 3 million people. He was talking about, what would you do? What we were talking about earlier. When would you put your life on the line? And these guys that were fighting with the Vercingetorix, they were trying to defeat Caesar, but he beat them.
Right.
And it was close at one point, but once they beat him, there were 3 million people when he entered. He killed 1 million people. He enslaved 1 million people, and he left 1 million people behind, and he cut a deal with them to make commerce. And they basically started developing agriculture, what have you.
Right.
Part of that was wine. They did that in Germany.
Interesting.
They did that in Spain.
Interesting.
And he would leave his generals and underlings, give them land, put them in charge. They built vineyards, and the Romans got it all started. And then it collapsed, and then the church came in.
Right.
They've kind of built on all that.
Right.
But so I don't know how we got there.
Well, no, but Russia. There's wine made in Russia, right?
Absolutely.
There have to be.
Yeah,
it's such a huge land expanse. I mean, I would think that the climate has to be somewhat reasonable.
Heard of Soviet Georgia on the Black Sea?
Oh, Georgia, yeah.
There's a debate as to where wine wine has been, fermentation occurs spontaneously. So man has been probably drinking fermented juice for tens of thousands of years.
Right.
You know what I mean? It makes you feel good, right? There's alcohol in there, and it tastes good.
Right.
But the commercial wine production, the debate is whether it started in Armenia or Georgia.
Okay.
Because, on the Black Sea, and Macedonia is also on the Black Sea.
Right.
That's a climate that's very conducive to growing grapes.
Got it.
So, most of the Russian wine came from Georgia when it was part of the Soviet Union.
Got it.
When they broke away, I don't know a lot about the Russian market. They might be importing it. I really don't know. I mean, I know they drink a lot of vodka still, from what I understand.
There's no question.
Yeah.
The most of the African nations, the African states, it's obviously too hot, right? The climate's not conducive until you get towards South Africa, I'm guessing.
South Africa is a big one, but even in other countries, there's a book about that too. It's called, I reviewed it once. I think it's called, it's a book about African wines. If you put African wines into Google, there's not a lot of books about it, but it'll come up. And the places like Tanzania, Kenya, they have these highlands.
Right.
They grow grape.
Up on the mountains?
Yeah, up in the mountains.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I know Tanzania for sure, Kenya. I don't know, and I know South Africa, obviously, for sure, because they have a lot of maritime influence, which it's not as hot. This is kind of off track, but when I was back when I was 22, I actually went to West Africa for a visit with one of my college roommates, and they drink palm wine there.
Palm wine.
Palm wine, yeah. But I experienced a coup in the country where.
Oh my gosh! Are you serious?
I'm not
Are
kidding
you serious?
Maybe we could save that for another show.
Okay.
That's a whole nother story.
Oh we're gonna definitely vet that out for sure.
That's a good one. I told somebody that story the other day.
Well, quickly, what about places like Hawaii? They grow a lot of fruit there,
wine.
right? They grow pineapple wine.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Interesting.
I may have had pineapple wine. I mean, it's like
That's interesting.
Anything that has sugar in it.
Right.
One time I used to teach classes at the Allegheny Community College, wine appreciation introductory classes. Okay. And two of my students were prison guards at the old Western Penitentiary.
Okay.
And one night the guy actually brought in, this is so horrible, confiscated hooch that he had made.
Oh my gosh.
And, so anything with sugar. And my friend Charlie Martin, who has now passed away in World War II, he was on one of these Pacific islands.
Right.
And he said, they would ferment anything. He says, anything tastes good when you're on the island, So it's true. I mean, there's anything with sugar.
Okay.
Pineapple.
Okay.
And even if you don't have the fruit, you get kits, But, I mean, like, for example, in Minnesota, they do grow grapes there, but it's hard. Florida, they grow these...
Canada.
Canada, for sure, absolutely. Like in Ontario, because you have the lakes.
Right.
And that, modulates and has a moderating effect on the cold weather. And they do a lot of wine in Canada, and there's some really good ones in the Niagara Peninsula in Ontario.
Well, yeah, it's not too far actually from Erie, right?
No, it isn't. It's just up
or Buffalo.
Buffalo. It may even be colder. Now, see, I've never heard of wine growing in Buffalo, but I'm sure it's probably there. Commercial wineries.
Alaska, too far away.
They say every
state has
every
it.
state. I mean, I've never heard. I don't think I've ever had an Alaskan wine. So that would be one would probably want to try. But that would be kind of tough, I would think. Because that is far up there. So.
I think they're daylight deprived, right? I mean, the growing season has to be very odd up there.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, that's a place where they probably want to bring some decent wine in.
I can, as a child, I spent a lot of summers in Calgary, and I could swear.
Calgary, Alberta, Calgary.
Yes.
Oh wow. Okay.
And I can, if I really think back on it, Dave, I can remember, like. And my family up there was a little well-to-do. We did, it was the side of the family that we don't really have much in common with. But they, I can remember us going to a winery, a vineyard.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Well, in Calgary, that far up.
Why not?
Okay.
Okay. I mean, for example, it probably was not European grape varieties. Things like Concord grapes, Delaware grapes. There are grape varieties called Vitis Lambrusca, that can survive the winter.
Okay.
I mean, here we are, Harmony. Where's Harmony? Harmony. That's right across the river, right?
Yep.
That was one of the biggest grape growing places in the country at one point.
Didn't know that.
They weren't allowed to have sex, but they could drink wine. They're called the Harmonists, right? Am I right? Those guys over in Harmony. They went out of business. It wasn't so much good. Only the top guy, I think, could. But then they moved down the Ohio River, and back in the 19th century, that was the biggest grape growing commercial wine was from the Ohio River Valley near Cincinnati.
Wow.
But they grew these American grapes. And, that's kind of, it doesn't make really good table wine because it has this, it's like what Grandma used to make, this foxy, distinctive smell. It doesn't smell like red fruit. It smells like grapes, like grape jelly, like Concord grape jelly. That's what it smells like. So,
before we wrap this up, I'll tell you this experience. My wife and I went last year, and I might have told you this. We went to went to Erie, went to the wine tour. We ended up buying quite a bit of wine. It was pretty darn good. But at one of the wineries, they sold us and I need your help to determine the kind of wine this was. But it was in a little glass skull. They bottled it in a little glass skull, and it was very thick, almost like cough syrup.
Yeah. That's from. That is, I believe, from Courtyard Winery.
Okay.
Which has a branch in the Strip District. That's their port wine.
That is their version of port.
Yeah, I forget what that's called.
Oh, I will tell you,
that's a fortified wine. It's like 25% alcohol.
But
like
that is an interesting experience drinking that stuff.
Yeah,
if you're not used to that.
That's an after dinner drink. Yeah,
it's almost like it almost has a liqueur feel to it. Anyway,
that definitely is.
Wasn't really for me, but the bottle was cool. But it just wasn't.
Is that the one that had? It's like kind of like. Kind of tilted a little bit. Yeah, that's Courtyard Winery. That guy's done. Again, I forget the gentleman's name that owns it, but they make very good dry sparkling wine. Mm-hmm. They make a good red wine from Chambourcin, which is a French hybrid.
Okay.
Which is kind of a combination, the American wine and the grape variety and the French grape variety.
Okay.
They make a really good port. And they make some really good sweet wines, and you can buy them in the Strip District. They have,
did not know that.
Yeah, you could probably get that one right there. The skull wine. Yeah,
put hair in your chest.
Yeah,
that was some powerful stuff for sure.
Yeah.
But this was great, my friend.
My pleasure.
Yeah,
and
you always come
back.
Yeah, you always come bearing gifts. Of course, I'm going to invite you back.
I have a method to my madness.
But I appreciate you coming on a regular basis here.
My pleasure.
I want to continue the process.
Yeah.
Your next trip is when?
Actually, I do have a trip coming up in later this month to France, to southern France.
Okay.
It's not a tour group. It's just a week-long trip. And then I'm going to Burgundy in May.
Right.
And so far this year, that's all I'm going to do. So I don't know if I do anything in the fall. But I got to do the writing, too. So you can only have so much fun,
Absolutely right. Maybe you get back after your trip in May. I'd love to have you back.
I would love to do that, Eric.
All right, Dave. Thank you so much. Man. And again, my friend, so they know where to reach you.
daveswinecellar.com, daveswinecellar.com, or you go to the triblive.com. And, if vanity compels me to put my name in Google sometime. But if I put my name in there, Dave DeSimone and wine,
right,
pops right up.
Right away, immediately in Google.
It's easy to do.
All right.
All right.
Thank you, my friend.
Thank you.
We are out.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Thanks, Eric.
That was excellent.
Yeah, it was fun.
That was beyond fun.
Got rolling there.
Tips above the water, you watch me drown. You could have saved me, but you let me down. Yeah.